It is my privilege to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Charles Swindoll, Chancellor Emeritus of Dallas Theological Seminary. Dr. Swindoll, you once told me you didn't really know what chancellor meant. Now we've just added another word that we don't know what it means. That's right. Our speaker is simply known around the world as Chuck. Familiar name to many Christians around the world. In fact, many of you probably based your decision to attend this very seminary because of his association and affection for DTS. He served Dallas Theological Seminary as the fourth president and is known by millions around the world for his practical application of the Bible to everyday living. He now serves Dallas Seminary, as I mentioned, as Chancellor Emeritus and is also the senior pastor-teacher of Stonebriar Community Church in Frisco, Texas. He and his wife, Cynthia, reside here in the Metroplex and love to spend much of their time with their 4 grown children and 10 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren. Would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Swindoll to chapel today?
I chose that hymn we sang very deliberately and after quite some time thinking on it. It's an old hymn, 262 years old. And as is true of all old hymns, for those of us who were reared from our earliest years in the church, converted early in life, when we sing hymns that are older, they are always more familiar because of their being repeated through the years. And as is true of hymns like that, we begin to sing words that no longer grip us. And that's regrettable. Because hymns, unlike many other kinds of religious songs, are not only dripping with great theology, they also have a story behind them that is moving and sometimes, as in this case, tragic. Robert Robinson was only 22 years old when he composed that hymn. Though he was young and had been through a rugged childhood, having lost his father early in life, and having been such a rebel his mother couldn't handle him, was sent off to London where he would supposedly learn a trade in barbering. At least that's what her plan was for him. He got involved with a rough crowd, began to drink, and as was known in those days, carouse, and was living a profligate life, though he was still young in age, until he came under the persuasive influence of the well-known George Whitefield. George Whitefield. He was soundly converted as a result of Whitefield's ministry, and he instantly fell deeply in love with one who loved him even more, Jesus himself, and immediately began his study for the ministry. Like all of you, when you began your studies, and as I, when I began mine, he was enamored of the things of Christ. He couldn't get enough of the scriptures. And he had, as all of you have, the privilege of learning from those who mentored him and taught him. And he grew, even though young in the faith. When he was only 25 years old, he was called to the Baptist Church in Cambridge, where he ministered very effectively. crowds grew, as did his popularity. And before long, Robert Robinson was a name known all across the city of London and cities beyond. I'll let one of my mentors, the late Richard Sumey, former chaplain of Dallas Seminary, finish the story. It's tragic. His serving at the Baptist Church at Cambridge was the beginning not only of his great popularity, but of his lapse into careless ways and his eventual succumbing to his own carnality. He lived in that condition for years. It came about on this wise. In the old coaching days, a lady seated on the stagecoach was reading a little book with evident enjoyment. One page of that volume held special appeal to her, and so she consulted it from time to time, and then turned to her fellow passenger, a gentleman she presumed may be acquainted with the subject of religion. She held the page toward him and pointed to the hymn she had been reading, asked what he thought of it. Come, thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. The stranger read no further. He turned away from it. He endeavored to engage the lady's attention in something else, but she was not to be denied. Venturing another appeal, she told the man of the benefits she had received from that hymn and expressed her admiration for its message. With that, overcome beyond the power of controlling his feelings, the stranger burst into tears. Madam, he said, please. I'm the poor, unhappy man who wrote that hymn many years ago, and I would give 1,000 worlds if I had them to enjoy the feelings I had then. That stranger was Robert Robinson. How ironic that in the end of that hymn, Robinson seemed to prophesy his own zigzag course when he wrote, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. And so he did, and so he died in defeat at the young age of 55. I never sing that hymn without remembering that story that I first read from Sumey's writings. I'm haunted by that story. And even though I am today far older than Robinson was when he died, I can only imagine what it must have been like to have the end of his own autobiography be an ending of defeat, marked by ongoing carnality. That hadn't always been true. Early in his ministry, he must have taken delight in having been led by God to write that hymn. And as Sunday night came and he would make his way home to the parsonage where they lived, he and his wife, he must have hummed that hymn to himself. I can imagine singing words of it as he was then enjoying the joys of ministry. Though young in life, already blessed of God, as so many of you are, and gifted, as all of you are, to one day proclaim his truth. But for Robinson, it was a reality. It was going on. How often he must have sung to himself those words of praise that begin the hymn. And when he got to that final verse, I think he was telling the truth about himself. Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy goodness like a fetter bind, don't miss this, my wandering heart to thee. Learn to sing hymns by pondering words. They're full of meaning. Here is a man acknowledging, even in a hymn he would write, the old battle with a wandering heart. Even came to the point of admitting, I'm prone to wander, Lord. I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. While he knew himself as best he could at the young age of 22, I'm confident that such wandering and such departure from the Lord was the farthest thing from his mind. He looked forward, like you do, to years of ministry on his feet, on his knees, touching souls, reaching out with a heart full of love for Christ, to attract those that were out of the faith and by God's grace would be used to draw them in. Who knows how many he led to come to Christ in his early years. Then something happened. As Subi put it, the beginning of his lapse was early on. I don't like reading that. I don't like thinking about that. I couldn't get that out of my mind when I asked Patrick to sing this song and lead us in it. And of all things, it led me to prepare my words to you today in an unexpected way. We read of Demas, who loved this present world, and by Paul's own admission in the last letter he wrote, departed from Paul for Thessalonica, maybe where he could blend into the crowd and not be seen as a companion of Paul. What would cause Demas's lapse? We're never told. When I was a student, I believe I was about a third-year student in my 4-year course at the school, and I was attending what was known then as a Spiritual Life Week. Every year we would have the joy of sitting in Chafer Chapel, and shoulder to shoulder with fellow students, we would listen to seasoned preachers as they would come and challenge us in our walk with Christ. We had heard one great challenging message to begin the series, and we were sort of on tiptoe wondering what the next day would bring. And the speaker didn't show up. Dr. Walford was leading the chapel, and as he always did, we had sung a hymn, and he had us sing another hymn since the speaker wasn't there. It's one of those things you do, and you'll have to do it when you're pastoring a church, and your guest hasn't shown up. Let's do another hymn, and you'll move into another one. And as I recall, we were almost going to turn to a third when the man walked in a little disheveled. Came in that side door and was shaking his head and had his handkerchief in his hand, and he apologized to Dr. Walford, and he said, "I want to apologize now to all of you students. The chapel was almost packed." And he said, "I have just had a heartbreaking experience. I just entered name number 42 in my journal. Like you, we had no idea what that meant. He said, when I got into ministry, I learned from a missionary that it might be a good idea to keep a journal. And my journals are all confidential. I write them mainly for my own benefit, and when I review them, it challenges me in my walk. And every year, he says, I read through them. And I have made it a habit of mine to record names of once great preachers who have fallen. You see," he said, "I just received a phone call." And then he began to sob. And he couldn't go on. Dr. Walford got up and put his hand on his cheek. He said, I'll be okay. Walford towered over him. And he looked up and said, "Thank you. I'll be fine." He said, "Today I just learned, and I have no interest in calling a name," he said, "but I've entered his name, and he's number 42 in my journal of once great preachers who have fallen morally." Every one of them, he said, was a complete surprise. A number of them had ministered to me as I was forming my own style of ministry, and I watched them and listened to them with great gratitude. And now they're in my journal. When I arrived for this conference, he said, I had 41 names, and now I've added the 42nd. And it breaks my heart to do so. I sat there stunned, first at the number of names, and then trying to imagine the stories of men who had stood in the pulpit and delivered the Word of God, some of them outstanding expositors, all of them used of God greatly, who were prone to wander and prone to leave the God they loved. And finally they did. How does that kind of moral erosion occur? I've chosen that sentence carefully, for it is an erosion. F.B. Meyer is correct. No one suddenly becomes base. No church suddenly splits. No marriage suddenly breaks up. No tree suddenly falls. It's slowly rotted from within. No business suddenly fails. No school suddenly closes. No life suddenly falls. It's a slow, secret, subtle falling away. Don't miss the word secret. It's never publicly announced, of course not. Never admitted, most likely never acknowledged, not even as Robinson acknowledged in his hymn. You would think these individuals were solid as a stone in their faith. Their eyes would never wander. And subtle, ever so discreet, cleverly masked, no pun intended. But all kept so private. I'll show it to you in one verse of Scripture, one of the short ones. And I want you to turn. If you have the Greek text, turn there. I'll refer to that in a moment. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 22. And I'm speaking today to every man, every woman in this chapel or witnessing this event online, and to myself as well. These are words for each one of us. 1 Thessalonians 5:22. Abstain from every form of evil. It is rendered in the New American Standard Version. If you'll notice the marginal reference, every form of, could be rendered every appearance. Even the appearance of evil. The Greek text begins by reversing the order of the sentence. From every appearance of evil, abstain. From even the appearance. May sound extreme. It's not. It's safe. You'll never fall if you obey 1 Thessalonians 5:22. I'll guarantee you that. It's absolutely airtight. You're safe. It's wise. It's needed, especially among those of us in ministry. For you see, as you are in your studies here, you're deeply engaged in the delightful discovery of truth. Theology is beginning to make sense. You're learning it systematically. You're discovering, if you're in that particular track, the nuances of the languages, and you're seeing how the color of the text emerges as well as you're getting to know those original languages. As you study church history, you're seeing the flow of God's work, and it's exciting to you. You've never seen that before. If you're like I was, it's all like a brand new story that's beginning to unfold, and you can't wait from one class to another. Probably more true in your first year than your last year, huh? But at least as you got underway, would to God that we all stay that excited and remain that enthusiastic about the things of Christ. Why is that important? Because we're prone to wander. See, you've learned the theology of depravity. Now you're forced to face it, at least from my exhortation. You've got that problem. When I check the word evil, because it stands out with such pulsating significance, paneros, I discovered from Walter Bauer, that the Greek term pertains to being morally or socially worthless. Keep listening. He gives a list of synonyms. pertaining to being morally or socially worthless, wicked, evil, bad, vicious, malicious, base, degenerate. Steer clear of all the above, is what the verse is saying. Steer clear of it. Stay away from it. Don't play with it. Don't watch it. Don't go to movies that emphasize it. Don't read books that stimulate it. Get tough on yourself, because you're prone to wander. So is the one sitting next to you, in front of you and behind you, and the one speaking to you today. This is no lecture for others. This is for all of us. Again, it may sound extreme. It's not. It is the secret of living a full life in ministry, serving Christ without regrets, without skeletons being found when you're laid away. Rather recently, I got another story of another fallen soldier in the ranks, and it broke my heart. What's worse, it broke the heart of my grandson, who held that man up as his model. Couldn't believe it. I don't know why I couldn't believe it, because I believe the scriptures, and it's very clear that we're all needing to abstain from every form of evil, men and women alike, day or night, early or late, in church or in mission work, in evangelistic work or counseling, serving in music ministries, being involved as a teacher. Look at the verse again. From every appearance of evil, abstain. No wobble room. So don't give yourself any. Don't risk. Don't run with those who do. Your mind is a wonderful thing, and God has given it to you to be filled with knowledge and to be equipped so that you can leave this place and go out away from the courses and the faculty and the schedule that's set forth for you while in school, and you're there. And believe me, your adversary is waiting for that moment. He knows every chink in your armor. He's made a study of you since you first took your breath on this earth. He knows more about you than you know about yourself. I appreciate it when authors send me a copy of their books. And I recently was sent a book. This is Andy Stanley's newest book. I didn't know he had written it. Better Decisions, Fewer Regrets. Isn't that a great title? 5 questions to help you determine your next move. Really a good book. I read it twice. Small book. He offers an integrity question, a legacy question, a conscience question, a relationship question, and a maturity question. It's the maturity question that grabbed my attention when I was preparing these thoughts for us today. What is the wise thing to do? Great question. Since I am to, and since you are to abstain from every appearance of evil, what's the wise thing to do? So allow me, Andy says it far better than I could say it. Listen to the way Andy writes about that. While it's been a while since a curfew dictated your driving habits, your current driving habits are in fact influenced by a similar dynamic. Unless you're an unusual driver, you drive at speeds at or slightly above the posted speed limit. I thought, how did he know that? But we all do. What most of us feel little to no guilt about driving faster than the posted speed limit, none of us want to get pulled over for speeding, so we choose the speed we're convinced allows us to break the law without or while avoiding an encounter with the law. How did he know that? Because he does it too, I'm sure. And in most cases, no harm done. The point? Whether it's curfew, diet, driving, dating, spending, our natural inclination is to live as close to the line as possible. You see where I'm going, where he's going in this. What line? The line between legal and illegal. The line between responsible and irresponsible. The line between moral and immoral. Between ethical and unethical. The line between I'm still in control and I now need help. It's human nature to snuggle up to the edge of irresponsibility, disaster, or embarrassment and stay there as long as possible. It's human nature to get by with as much as we can get by with without becoming our own worst enemy, without undermining our own success, without being grounded, expelled, fired, or kicked out of the house. That doesn't change because you're in the ministry. That doesn't change because you have a degree from Dallas Seminary. Fueling our incessant flirtation with disaster is an unexamined assumption that informs our decision making. Forgive me, I'll read the sentence again. Fueling our incessant flirtation with disaster is an unexpected assumption that informs our decision making. Unexamined assumptions are dangerous. We think like this: if it's not wrong, it's all right. If it's not illegal, it's permissible. If it's not immoral, it's acceptable. If it's not over the line, it's fine. It's fine. If the problem with those sorts of assumptions is not immediately apparent, put on your older brother or sister hat for a moment. If you're a parent, put on your parent hat. I bet you don't set the bar that low for your kids. That's tantamount to organizing our lives around the lowest common denominator. Essentially, we're asking, how low can I go? How close can I get to bad without being bad? How close can I get to wrong without doing something wrong? Or if you're religious, how close can I get to sin without actually sinning. It doesn't stop there. Before long, we're asking, how far over the line can I go without getting caught? That's how it happens. That's it. You mess with it, but you don't go over the line. But the longer you spend at the line, the more comfortable you are getting beyond it. Before long, we're asking, how far over the line can I go without getting caught or experiencing the consequences? How unethical, immoral, or insensitive can I be without creating unimaginable outcomes? How long can I reject my family, neglect my family, my finances, or my health without feeling the effects? How much can I indulge in addictive behavior? Here's another angle. Why do good parents tell their children to be careful? Why don't parents tell their children, drive as fast as the law allows? Drink your limit. Go as far as you can on your date without getting slapped. Don't come home until curfew. What do we mean by careful? We mean caution. Be aware of your surroundings. Don't take unnecessary risks. Don't jeopardize your safety for the safety of others. This has 1 Thessalonians 5:22 written all over it. We're saying don't dangle your toes off the edge of illegal, immoral, unsafe, or unhealthy. That's good advice for everybody. One more. I love this illustration. Why do we react immediately when we see a toddler playing at the edge of a swimming pool? They aren't drowning. They aren't even wet. Well, they aren't wet on the outside. Why do we panic? We panic because we know that one small step in the wrong direction can result in tragedy. While I was a student here, that happened to one of our dear students, and they lost their son. That's how it happened to David, the king, over 50 years old. His name is a household word in all the nation. The flag is named after him. Star of David. The city is named after him. F.B. Meyer writes of that fall of David, handles it beautifully without going too far and explaining it all. Why do we need adultery explained? Let us beware of our light, unguarded hours. Moments of leisure are more to be dreaded than those of strenuous toil. Boy, that's a good line. Middle life for David was above 50 years of age, has no immunity from temptations and perils which beset the young. One false step taken in the declension of spiritual vigor may ruin a reputation built up by years of religious exercise. A message came one day to David from his companion that the sin could no longer remain hidden. Men and women, you will one day be used by God to serve him. You will take this training, you will bundle it into your own style and method of ministry. You will fit it with your gift mix. And all of this is as it should be. And little by little, you will begin to be used of God. People will hang on your words. They will crowd into rooms where you will speak. They will quote you. They will read you. They will admire you. Danger lurks. You can't imagine it right now. I couldn't either when I was a student. Thank God I've never known the fall that these 42 men did. Thank God. But the opportunity for such was certainly mine, and it will be yours. As he says, we're not immune. Let him who thinks he stands, what? Take heed, lest he fall. Again, let him who thinks he stands, take heed, lest he fall. He or she. The older I get, the more burdened I am about this. I don't have a fixation on it. I don't think of it when I first meet you. I don't question things like this when I meet a person greatly used of God. I'm not suspicious. I'm so trusting. I'm almost naive at times, to my own surprise. I'm not jaded, but I'm realistic. That verse is in the book. And you better take it with you. And you better never forget it. Abstain from even the appearance. Whether you're at home, in your study, door closed, shades drawn, computer on, you take it from there. You can traffic into the most vile, sexually explicit scenes anywhere on the planet. All on your own. Unless I miss my guess, some of you are doing that. I pray you're not. That's the first step toward the fall. And the fall, I have Randy Alcorn to thank for the consequences. In a piece years ago that was included in a Christian magazine, I found the consequences of a moral tumble. I close with the list. Whenever I feel particularly vulnerable to sexual temptation, I find it helpful to review what effects my actions could have. And he lists them. I'll just use excerpts. Our time is over. Grieving the Lord who redeemed me, dragging his sacred name into the mud, following in the footsteps of these people whose immorality forfeited their ministries and caused me to shudder at the time, listing their names. Inflicting untold hurt on Nancy, my best friend and loyal wife. Losing Nancy's respect and trust, hurting my beloved daughters, Karina and Angie. Destroying my example of credibility with my own children and nullifying both present and future efforts to teach them to obey God. Why do I want to listen to a man like that? They would think. causing shame to my entire family, including my parents, who helped prepare me for ministry, losing self-respect, wasting years of ministry training, undermining the faithful example and hard work of other Christians in my community. Heaping judgment and endless difficulty on the person with whom I committed adultery. Possibly bearing the physical consequences of diseases like gonorrhea and syphilis and chlamydia, herpes and AIDS. Perhaps infecting Nancy, or in the case of AIDS, causing her death. Invoking shame and lifelong embarrassment on myself. Don't ever forget today, ever. These words are meant for you, for you, for you, for me. These are words of needed warning. The key, listen to it again, abstain. Final tip, it may help you, I hope so. When I did more traveling in my earlier years in ministry, I made the habit of carrying pictures of my family. And when I would go to a table to eat alone, I'd set the picture of my family up right there on the table. That is a wonderful way of blocking lust, you know? As you're sitting there looking at the faces of your dear wife or husband and your children. I would put that picture by my telephone, often another picture of just my dear wife, Cynthia, who faithfully believes I'm behaving while I'm away from home. Carrying a picture of your own family, holding it dear, putting it on display is a wonderful restraint to yourself and others. How many times a fall begins with a meal alone with the opposite sex? Stay away from that. Abstain from even the appearance of evil. Got it? Tough words, Lord, but you wrote them and you meant them and you didn't stutter. And you've preserved them down through the centuries. Just as important as John 3:16 and Romans 5:8 and 9. Just as powerful as John 3:31 is 1 Thessalonians 5:22. May these words guide us and keep us pure as we abstain from even the appearance of evil. In the pure name of your Son, Jesus, who knew no sin, did no sin, had no sin, and is able to empower us to live above the drag of sin's power, we pray. Everyone said,